bell hooks said that canons secure institutions and the late legendary bell hooks said that canons secure institutions and institutions secure canons. When we only allow mainstream repertoire lists, like traditional syllabi, to dictate what we teach in piano lessons, we ensure a gender and racially biased narrative where the voices of women of color are not present. For the next few minutes, we are going to dive into the history of gender and racial inequity in mainstream piano curriculum in Canada through the lens of music conservatory piano syllabi. By presenting over 50 years of data points from multiple Canadian conservatories, we will look at why the piano canon has an intersectionality problem and what we can do about it. Next, we will look at newly graded piano resources by BIPOC women from preparatory to diploma levels. In Canada, private music lessons largely operate using the curriculum laid out by music conservatories, the biggest conservatories being Royal Conservatory of Music and Conservatory Canada. Their curriculum is laid out by graded music syllabi, which are typically updated every 5 to 10 years and give a list of quote-unquote appropriate music to be played within each musical level. My colleague Annalie Leptison at the University of Ottawa and I conducted a survey of private music teachers. When we asked whether they agreed that racism in music education was a problem, 57.3% of teachers said that they agree. 19.5% of teachers do not believe that it is a problem. And asked if they prioritize teaching music by BIPOC composers, only 16% of teachers said that it is a priority. Out of 57% of teachers who believe that racism in classical music is a problem, only a small portion of them are addressing it by teaching the music of BIPOC composers. The research I carried out for my master's degree is twofold. I first addressed the gap in the conservatory piano curricula in Canada by examining the disparity of representation of women, specifically BIPOC women, in the piano curriculum, using the song data methodology, which takes into account both biographic and bibliographic data of songwriters, or in my case, piano composers. The second leg of the project is the development of piano curricular resources that elevate BIPOC women's voices. In my research work, I curated a piano syllabus of nearly 4,000 compositions by women and centered the voices of women of color, having graded hundreds of compositions according to the Canadian Conservatory grading methods. I created the piano syllabus as an accessible resource for teachers to teach graded music by women composers. In doing this, I hope that these pieces become a part of the mainstream piano repertoire. Dr. Samantha Edge says that she was, quote, inoculated to see classical music as the exclusive domain of white men, end quote. The music and names that we hear from early on in our musical training define what we want to play. Music resources shape what musicians teach and what students learn, perform, and listen to. In my research, I explore the racial and gender bias in conservatory piano syllabi and advocate for the inclusion and representation of BIPOC women. Let's look at some data. We start with Conservatory Canada. In this graph, we see a steady increase in the inclusion of women composers. Women comprised 7.4% of the repertoire in 1967 and grew to 16% in 2018. Over 50 years, the rate of gender inclusion has more than doubled, but women only make up 16% of 20th and 21st century lists. In 1999, the first women of color are introduced to the piano syllabi through the music of Chi Hua Tan and Alexina Louis, who make up only 0.6% of compositions found in the examined repertoire lists for that year. This number is barely significant enough to be visible on the graph. There is an increase in the inclusion of BIPOC female composers in 2018 from 0.6% to 0.9%. This next graph displays the inclusion of women over the 50 years examined. Though the inclusion of women increases with each new edition of the piano syllabus, they only comprise 7.4% of 20th and 21st century repertoire over 50 years. The number of BIPOC female composers included is not statistically significant enough to appear on the graph. Here we see the inclusion of music by BIPOC women over the progression of 50 years. The number of pieces by women began with 8 pieces in 1967 and grew to 281 pieces by 51 composers. Within that group of women, only 2 are women of color, and their inclusion went from 0 to 16 pieces over 50 years. Lastly, here is the breakdown of gender representation within each grade throughout the years examined. The data shows a large number of women in grade 1 repertoire, totaling 40.3%. The inclusion of women is decreasing at an average rate of negative 3.4% in each grade. There is a good reason for the large number of pieces included in earlier conservatory grades. Several music publishing companies in Canada publish a large number of female composers whose music targets early elementary musicians. Music published by Deborah Wanless Publishing, Red Leaf Piano Works, and Mayfair Music, ACNMP Piano Syllabus, and Frederick Harris Publishing has a significant impact on the repertoire included in the early elementary grades, specifically within the last decade. We now move on to the Royal Conservatory of Music repertoire. The data shows an increase in the inclusion of music by women in the 20th and 21st century repertoire lists. From left to right, women comprised 3.3% of repertoire in 1970 and grew to 18% in 2015. In 1988, the first composition by a BIPOC woman was included, with 2 compositions by Alexina Louis making up 0.2% of the repertoire included in that list that year. By the final syllabus examined from 2015, BIPOC female composers make up 1.1% of total compositions included. The 1.1% is the music of only 2 composers, Chi Hua Tan and Alexina Louis. This graph reports the percentage of inclusion of women over the years examined. Women make up 3.4%, and the number of compositions by BIPOC females is not statistically significant enough to appear on the chart. Though there is a significant increase of inclusion of music by women over the years examined, women make up only 3.4% of 20th and 21st century repertoire over the last 50 years. Here we see the increasing rate of inclusion of women. Looking at women overall in the 20th and 21st century repertoire lists and the increase of music by BIPOC women within that variable. The number of pieces included by women grew from 20 pieces in 1970 to 309 in 2015. Out of the 309, 20 of them are pieces by BIPOC women. These graphs show the gender breakdown of composers by grade. The percentage of female composers in grade 1 is 25.7%. The rate of gender inclusion is at an average decline of negative 2% per grade. Only one BIPOC female composer is present at the associate level, but her inclusion is not statistically significant enough to appear in bold on the graph. The rate of inclusion is at a steady decline from early elementary grades to the associate level. The conservatory data findings reinforce what I call the cycle of exclusion. In Canada, many students plan their musical year around music festivals and conservatory examinations. Conservatory exams qualify for high school credits, and the participation in festivals and exams can bring promises of scholarships for further music education. But the catch is that students must choose from the previously graded material put out by conservatories, which excludes female and BIPOC voices. The cycle of gate race meets bass clef and aids students who make the bar line. The level 2 student strengthens their skills from level 1. The additional skills include exploration and refinement of the damper pedal. Students learn to increase expression and balance of tone within List B pieces. Expressive titles are still present, but are less direct. The level 2 student explores pieces in major and minor. Students explore expanded tonalities such as modes, pentascales, and introductory jazz idioms. They become proficient in reading rhythms, increasing in difficulty. Students must show control and refinement in dynamic contrasts. The piece Sea Turtle by Karen Tanaka is a character piece, comparable to List B pieces. This piece uses an imaginative title, it is in 2/2 time, and requires great patience to perform. Students might imagine each phrase aligning with the smooth and controlled motion of a swimming sea turtle. In this piece, students need a refined control of the damper pedal to aid in the expressive phrasing. Students must present balance between the melody and accompaniment between the hands and play outside of the 5-finger hand positions, shifting positions on the staff. A rhythmic challenge in this piece is the shifting between triple and duple figures in the right hand. In Level 3, students learn sonata form through classical sonatinas. They build on Baroque dance forms and begin to refine control of touch and tone and increase awareness of formal structure, according to the RCM syllabus. This grade focuses on developing hand coordination and rhythmic precision through the hands together technical exercises. Grade 3 moves away from the inventions as students demonstrate complete hand independence. In this grade, students learn irregular rhythms and pieces no longer remaining in simple time signatures. Because of the introduction of the sonatina in List B, students become familiar with the Alberti bass. Triplets, though introduced in earlier grades, become normal within this level. Students learn to develop their tone quality throughout Level 3. The piece I leveled is Klavierstück No. 7 by Boston bass composer Melika M. Fitzhugh. This is a pop-style piece that fits well into List C, Level 3 repertoire. The composition is through-composed but uses repetitive patterns. One of the clear focuses of Grade 3 is, quote, to develop hand coordination and rhythmic precision, end quote, and the use of irregular time signatures. With this piece in 7-8, the student must learn rhythmic accuracy in lining up the hands as they shift from groups of 3 to groups of 4 in 7-8 time. Control of tone through touch is essential in the performance of this short but dynamic piece. The Level 4 student is deep in intermediate repertoire, and the repertoire challenges students to explore new genres, textures, and compositional styles. Sonatinas and sonatas present new accompaniment styles and pianistic figurations, and the List C pieces explore new musical and technical challenges. Scales and triads are in new keys. Students are now reading fluently and many rhythms and are familiar with shifting time signatures. Grade 4 is the first grade that students must know the perfect fourth in their oral tests. Students must also perform the triads hands together. The Level 4 pianist is required to shift hand positions frequently. In Level 4 theory, students learn to read ledger lines above and below the staves for the first time. The piece I introduced for Level 4 repertoire is Dusk by Dr. Nkeiru Okoye, an American storyteller, researcher, historian, and composer. It is in the key of E-flat minor and uses many hollow, perfect fourths and fifths in block chord form. The Level 4 student explores new compositional textures through this. This piece varies from the typical melody and accompaniment texture. It expands the student's understanding of tonality, performing in E-flat minor. Until this point, the repertoire on the black keys uses a pentatonic tonality. Dusk, however, does not. Level 4 is the first time that students are required to play hands-together chords in their technique, which is required throughout Dusk. Level 4 repertoire familiarizes shifting time signatures, and Dusk shifts time signatures 9 times, moving from regular to irregular time signatures throughout. This piece appeals to the growing maturity of tone and touch of the Level 4 student and introduces the student to unfamiliar textures and key signatures while fulfilling many of the technical requirements of Level 4. The Level 5 pianist continues to develop with intermediate repertoire. Students begin to play longer pieces, explore different musical forms, and fuller harmonic textures. They learn to maintain more sophisticated interplays of melody and accompaniment. Grade 5 is the first grade in which students learn about dominant seventh chords. Students know minor and major sixth intervals by ear and seventh chords. And students develop fluency in ornamentation. Students must demonstrate quick and precise movement between large sections of the keyboard. Sweet Mr. Jelly Roll by New York-based composer Valerie Capers is a piece from Portraits in Jazz, a book of jazz pieces for classically trained pianists. Sweet Mr. Jelly Roll is a ragtime and the opening hat tips to the Maple Leaf Rag by Scott Joplin. This piece makes frequent use of 7 chords. Quick and precise movements and an established sense of keyboard geography are necessary. Plenty of ornamentation is present throughout the piece. The ragtime is a form introduced in Level 5, expanding the student's knowledge of dance forms and genres. The Level 6 pianist continues to explore intermediate level repertoire with an expanded understanding of repertoire styles and genres. New challenges include clear voice leading and polyphonic textures, rhythmic control in longer sonatina movements, and imaginative expression in romantic repertoire. In Level 6, there are new key signatures, quicker tempos, and a more developed understanding of harmonies through the introduction of diminished seventh chords, cadences, and greater technical control through technical tests. The piece I introduced for Level 6 is the Rippling Spring Waltz by Estelle Rickets. Rickets is noted as the first Black female composer to publish in North America. Rippling Spring Waltz is an excellent composition for the developing pianist. The waltz is lengthy, but the difficulty level remains consistent throughout the piece. This piece, though a waltz, exemplifies many of the same technical difficulties of a classical sonatina, using quick scalar passages requiring advanced understanding of pedaling and a clear melodic line. The Level 6 repertoire introduces students to Romantic-era waltzes. This piece compares in difficulty to easier Chopin and Schubert waltzes. Through Rippling Spring Waltz, students display mature voice control between the hands and present a clear melodic line, all while maintaining a refined sense of pedaling. Rippling Spring Waltz exemplifies the many qualities required in Level 6 repertoire and echoes the techniques found in Clementi and Kuhlau sonatinas and Chopin waltzes. The Level 7 repertoire begins to cross the divide between intermediate and advanced piano. The List A repertoire continues with advancing Baroque dances and branches into two-part inventions. The List B repertoire now breaks into more advanced sonatinas and full-length sonatas, while the List C repertoire continues to explore well-known Romantic-era music. In Level 7, students begin to use four-note chords in their technique and perform all technical exercises hands together. The piece I chose for Level 7 is Mayflower by Ottawa-based composer Beverley Mckiver from her set Canadian Floral Emblems. Mayflower is an elegant nocturne that fits well into List C repertoire of Level 7. In Level 7 and 8, students learn nocturne bass lines in which the left hand plays seamless arpeggio passages as the right hand carries the melodic line. A hallmark of the Level 7 repertoire is an advanced sense of accompaniment styles. The student must develop a fine sense of rhythmic control and precision throughout this piece in order to perform the shifting time signatures. Lastly, this nocturne requires a mature sense of tone and arm weight as the melodic line switches from single notes to octaves while softening dynamics. Level 8 continues the transition from intermediate to advanced repertoire. The Level 8 student must have an advanced sense of musicality and display specific characteristics from each musical period. The technical requirements increase to include 4-octave scales and arpeggios and quicker tempi. The repertoire explores the full range of the instrument and begins to introduce advanced piano masterworks. The Level 8 student handles lengthy repertoire with an advanced sense of musical awareness and explores abstract musicality through modes and demonstrates color and atmosphere. This Romantic-era waltz is from the end of the 19th century as part of Brazilian composer Chiquinha Gonzaga's dances. The Level 8 repertoire introduces students to waltzes by Schubert, Chopin, and Brahms. Gonzaga's waltzes are similar to Romantic waltzes in style and technique. This piece is lengthy but maintains the same level of difficulty throughout, requiring focus and musical commitment. This waltz requires the student to expand both their hands beyond the octave and uses rolled chords. The waltz bass line is played by the left hand, while the right hand communicates expressive and lyrical romanticism. In Level 8 repertoire, 4-note forms and octave passage work become lengthy and more frequent. These technical elements are present throughout Gonzaga's piece. The pianist must be expressive in setting mood and atmosphere and requires detailed pedaling and advanced technicality throughout, using extended right-hand passage work. The Level 9 repertoire moves into larger-scale advanced piano works. The technical requirements increase, and students are now able to play in all key signatures. The repertoire is far less pedagogical as students now delve into more advanced repertoire. In Level 9, students are deep into music history and analysis and must develop a knowledge of styles within each historical period. The repertoire becomes increasingly subjective as students explore more musical genres and styles. Hallmarks of Romantic-era music in Level 9 are increasingly challenging mazurkas and waltzes. Students must have an advanced technical control and focus for communicating longer repertoire and concert programs. Musical maturity through expression is essential as students explore the emotional and dynamic capabilities of this music. The piece I discussed for Level 9 is Hiding by composer Karen Sunabacka, who is based out of Waterloo, Ontario. Sunabacka is Métis, and often her pieces are exploring her rich family heritage. Hiding is a piece for the early advanced pianist exploring contemporary repertoire. This piece uses extended techniques by plucking the strings on the inside of the piano, as shown in measures 2 to 7. This piece is atonal, although there are moments of cadential release throughout. In Level 9 Music History, students learn about contemporary classical music and atonal music. Hiding is in a waltz style, but does not conform to traditional waltz pedaling, as indicated in the score by Sunabacka. This piece displays frequent tempo, time signature, and stylistic changes. Level 9 requires students to be fluent in mazurkas and waltzes. Mazurkas are a dance in triple time and characterized by unpredictable and shifting accents. Hiding demonstrates these qualities as the accents shift in the left hand and throughout the right hand melody. The pizzicatos on the strings inside the piano help expand the use of tonal color. This piece is harmonically expressive and technically and rhythmically complex, and contains many characteristics of level 9 contemporary repertoire. The level 10 pianist is establishing their artistic voice through demanding repertoire and additional styles. Students must perform 3- and 4-part counterpoint and multiple contrasting sonata movements. The contemporary and romantic repertoire becomes increasingly more advanced. In level 10, a successful exam student prepares a program comparable to a full solo recital. The technical requirements are extensive, requiring knowledge of all key signatures, intervals, and basic harmony. Students must have extensive knowledge of Western music history and theoretically analyze the music, performing basic keyboard harmony. The pianist must be able to show subtle nuance within their tone, pedaling, and phrasing. The piece for level 10 repertoire is the second movement of American composer Florence Price's Sonata in E minor. While the entire work is at a diploma level, each movement stands well alone. The Andante is the easier of the 3 movements and compares to Chopin's nocturnes or Brahms' intermezzi. Andante is in rondo form, and the rondo theme mimics the themes of spirituals. The contrasting middle theme imitates the styles of Chopin and Schumann. In level 10, students must perform contrasting movements of piano sonatas outside of a sonata allegro form. Students need an extensive knowledge of music history and how it informs performance practice. They must know style and genres within each historical period. When learning this rondo, the student learns about the African American spiritual, and this piece encourages a deep look into the historical contributions of Florence Price. The final level I discussed is the Associate Diploma level, or ARCT. The associate level is the capstone of conservatory grades in Canada, where the pianist performs a full solo recital. The ARCT pianist communicates with confidence and a virtuosic command of the instrument, and fully understands the stylistic demands of each musical period, and performs proficiently with a high level of musicality. The ARCT pianist performs with musical maturity, technical facility, and an extensive knowledge of piano repertoire. The pianist must study ARCT repertoire for years. The final piece I discuss is Troubled Waters by American composer Margaret from her Spiritual Suite. Troubled Waters challenges the technical abilities of the pianist and requires an authoritative and virtuosic command of the piano. The pianist must also voice the melodic theme above multiple layers of harmonic texture. In the passage shown, the pianist voices the melody, circled in red, while performing quick and complex accompaniment material in the extremities of the piano. The melodic line trades between the right hand and left hand, a technique identical to Liszt's Un Sospiro. Troubled Water is technically demanding, pianistically virtuosic, and theoretically complex. Bonds was an important contributor to the Black Chicago Renaissance and advocated for other women of color, and her music has had a profound impact on the classical music canon. In my research, I found it exceedingly difficult to choose composers and pieces to feature, as there is a wealth of published circulating music by women of color. It is evident that women of color have and continue to make profound contributions to piano literature, both historically and presently. As you can see, there is no concrete reason for Black, Indigenous, and women of color to make up less than 1% of 20th and 21st century repertoire lists. When teachers change the narrative of who is included within piano lesson repertoire, it transforms our teaching, our studio spaces, our concert programming, and the future generation of music teachers. The BIPOC women presented within this talk, and many more like them, are loud and clear. Let's listen.